think of so we can move around our caramels when we're working, so to make it convenient. So I'm using a reusable kind of like shablon sheet from Falcon that comes with the quarter frames. You don't have to use that, you can use silicone mat only, but as you can see, my silicone mat is really worn out and there's some holes in it. So I have a steel plate, like a lifting tray from the enrober. You can use any tray as you like. Then I have a baking sheet paper on top of that, and then my silicone mat, and then optional this extra reusable sheet here. As you don't need it, but I find it quite nice to have. So this will form the bottom of the caramel, and then I place the frame on top there. So now when before I fill it up with the caramel, I can move it around, as you can see, but also when the caramel is in there, I can move it around when it's slightly cooled off. Okay, so in one pan, slightly smaller, I scale all my wet ingredients. So here goes in the butter, the cream, also the salt, and then we keep this pot warm so the cream and butter mixture is ready when we are gonna deglaze the sugar. So if the cream and butter is cold, we're gonna shock the sugar, and that can create some crystallization at a later stage, so your caramel will be gritty and grainy, and that's not what we want. So in my caramels, if you have followed me for a long time, you know that I really love the syrup that I'm using. Internationally it's called golden syrup, but here in Sweden it's called juice syrup. So it's an invert sugar, really has a nice mallard flavor to it that I really like in the caramels. So if you don't have that, you can actually make it, and there's a lot of recipes online on how to make your own golden syrup. Then I add the glucose and the sugar, and as you can see, I pour the glucose and the syrup, the golden syrup first. So I place the sugar on top of the syrup and the glucose, and this makes it a really stable and foolproof method, where it's basically impossible to have the caster sugar not dissolve properly. So since we have the syrup and glucose here, we can actually stir and be quite aggressive with the caramel. You don't have to be afraid that things are going to go wrong here. As you can see, I stir here while it's heating up. So I created this method. I do it this way because I want to make it easy to operate and foolproof, but also with the flavor layer from the golden syrup. So what the goal is here is that we are gonna cook this sugar up to 180 degrees Celsius. You can go higher if you want a deeper caramel, so you can go up to 195 if you want to, but in the base recipe here I stop at 180. I stir vigorously here. You don't have to be afraid that anything is gonna go wrong here. You have all the glucose and the syrup there to protect your sugar from crystallizing. And when you're browning your sugar and heating it up to 180, 85, 190, the structure of the sugar, the caster sugar that you put in there, will change. So it will be more hygroscopic, so it will attract and hold on to more moisture, but it will also be very hard for the sugar to recrystallize again, so it will stay smooth and creamy and not get gritty and grainy over time. As you can see, I'm working on the Control Freak, which is a very high-tech induction stove. are very exact and very precise. You can dial in your temperatures really well. But to measure the temperature inside the sugar, I use a thermopen thermometer. So you saw that it was 170 on the video there, but I then let it come up to 180. So now I just quenching the sugar with the warm butter and cream and the salt. So don't just throw everything in there at once. Do it in 2-3 rounds. We don't want the sugar to cool down too much. That can also create lumps that is hard to dissolve. So do it by 2-3 rounds. And now we're stepping into the second section of cooking the caramel, where we want to create the perfect texture. So when you caramelize the sugar, you create a flavor layer, and the second cook is more for creating the perfect texture. But there actually is a flavor component, a flavor layer in the second cook when you're cooking the caramel with the cream and the butter. So if you let it simmer like this on a very, very slow pace, you are also going to caramelize and create a Maillard reaction with the milk proteins. So you can enhance the flavor and deepen the flavor much more if you do this step a little bit slower. So you can be a little bit more rapid and just cook it on a higher heat to get up to the correct temperature. But if you do it slower and just take your time with the second cook, you are gonna develop another flavor layer. So this is basically up to you how you want to do it. So we are gonna aim for 124 degrees Celsius. And remember that this is at sea level. So if you are cooking your caramel at a high altitude, you are going to have to adapt the temperature a little bit. So for every 300 meters up, you have to lower your temperature 1 degree. So this is for Celsius and not Fahrenheit, so you have to remember that. As you can see, I use a heat-proof spatula, and this is to be able to scrape the bottom at all times. I don't like to use the whisk because it's not as efficient in scraping down caramel from the sides and making sure that we keep the bottom really nice and clean. And I'm using a pan, as you can see, with rounded edges, so it's really easy to keep the edges of the pan clean. So we are going to take a slight pause in the cooking process at around 112 to 114 degrees Celsius. And this is because we do have enough water left in the emulsion, in the caramel. A caramel is an emulsion, and we want to help it to emulsify better than it is on its own when it's cooking. So the friction and the heat and the movement is going to help to create an emulsion, but the emulsion is going to get more, it's going to get tighter if you mix it with a stick blender. So to help the emulsion and also help the end texture of your caramel, we are going to add some cocoa butter and also some chocolate. So I'm using caramel chocolate here. And inside the chocolate we have some lecithin that is going to help to create a better emulsion and a tighter emulsion. But also the cocoa fat here is going to stabilize the caramel when it's done during storage, and just make the caramel hold its shape better. So when working with a caramel, you can alter and change up the ratio between the milk fats and the cocoa fat. So if you take away a little bit more milk fat, you are going to be able to add more cocoa fat, and that's going to help you to create a more stable end product that holds its shape a little bit better. So first off, I just stir the cocoa butter and the chocolate in, so it's basically melted, but you can see there's some spots and speckles in there. So now I keep the heat on, and now we are going to blitz it with a stick blender. What you are going to see is that the surface of the caramel is gonna be a lot smoother. It's gonna be a little bit more glossier. You are just gonna see the transformation. You can see the transformation in the pan here as well. But if you go really close, you are gonna see that the droplets on top of the caramel, they start to disappear, and you have this glossy, smooth surface there. So my advice here is to take your time, take a spatula sometimes and just scrape the caramel in from the sides, and do this thoroughly. Spend at least 1 to 2 minutes just blitzing and mixing it properly. Don't worry about air bubbles at all. It does not matter here. They are gonna disappear at the end anyways, because we still are going to cook this caramel up. So why you don't mix it at the end is because the caramel is gonna start to set, and it's gonna be harder, it's gonna cool down when you do that, and when you pour it into the frame, it's gonna be harder to get it to flatten out perfectly. So stop at 112, 114 degrees. The caramel will still be fluid enough for you to mix it perfectly. And then we are going to move into the final stage, when we are gonna be very careful with hitting the correct temperature. So for me, that perfect temperature is 124 degrees at sea level. But you might want it a little bit softer, so you can go to 123, 122 degrees, depending on how you are going to use the caramel. That does matter as well. Okay, so now we pour the caramel into the frame, and just scrape the pan and help the caramel to get into the corners of your frame there. I'm using a steel frame. You can also use rubber frames. Doesn't really matter what frames you're using, but some frames will warp because of the heat, so steel or rubber is preferred here. So as you might remember, I have this steel plate underneath, then I have the baking sheet paper, then I have the silicone mat. You can stop there and just use the silicone mat if you have a fresh and nice silicone mat. But I also have this reusable shablon sheet that I showed you in the beginning underneath there. Okay, so the caramel has been sitting in room temperature for maybe an hour, and then I put it in a humidity controlled fridge. Remember that a normal fridge can potentially create some condensation on top of the caramel, and that will make it really sticky. So I prefer to keep it in the fridge because it makes it easier to handle and cut, but if it is very humid where you're working, I would not advise you to pop it in the fridge. So what I did there was that I put some baking sheet paper on top of the caramel, and then a tray, and then just flipped it over and peeled off the baking paper and the silicone mat and the reusable shablon sheet. So now it's just about time to cut it up, and if you have the possibility to store it a little bit cooler, if you store it in a cool environment, you could cover it with some baking sheet paper on top there as well when it's slightly solidified, so you protect it from the humidity. Because I think it's a lot more easy to handle your caramel when it's a little bit colder. So when it sits at around 13, 14, 15 degrees Celsius, it makes it a little bit firmer when you're cutting it, and when you're cutting your pieces with your knife, you are gonna create really sharp and nice tight edges on your caramel. So one thing that is very neat with this caramel and the ratio composition of this caramel is that it doesn't really stick on your knife, so you can cut it. As you can see, I don't have to warm the knife, I don't have to do much, it just doesn't stick. And using a larger, longer knife that I'm using is preferred. It's gonna make everything a little bit easier, especially when you are going to cut up your pieces. So I'm putting 2 caramel bars on at the top and at the bottom, and I put a ruler at the top there. So you could cut your caramel with a cutter, but I don't like how it kind of like rounds off the top edges, and it also creates a little, I don't know what to say, kind of like a waste thing underneath where the strings are going through the caramel, kind of like pulling the caramel down, creating not at all tight kind of like bottom edge of the pieces that you are going to enrobe, or whatever you're gonna do, if you're gonna just wrap them in paper or plastic. But if you are gonna enrobe them, I would suggest that just cutting by knife is just gonna create far nicer structure of your pieces. So if you are going to enrobe your caramels, you do have to create a bottom shablon. So that is very important. So before you flip it, like we did just before here, you have to create a tempered chocolate shablon at the bottom and then flip it, and then you can cut it. This is, I have not created a bottom shablon on this caramel, so I wanted to keep them clean because we are going to wrap them and sell them like they are. But if you are going to put them through the belt in the enrober or hand dip them, you have to have a bottom shablon, so remember that. So the caramel bars here, they make the ruler that I'm using hover just slightly over the caramel. The ruler, you can put it on top of the caramel, but it might just stick a little bit and be just a little bit annoying when you're working. So the rulers here, they really help to lift it up just a few millimeters. That makes it really easy to operate and do this section efficiently. So the caramel bars I bought at Chocolate World. They are not expensive at all, so they are really good. And the ruler or rulers, I have this small ruler and this bigger L-shaped ruler. You can buy them in any hardware store, but metallic steel rulers is absolutely something that I recommend. And this L-shaped ruler that is gonna make all your cuts really square, I cannot recommend you that one enough. And as you can see, I'm just marking the lines, I'm not cutting through. I'm just creating some lines in the caramels that is gonna guide me later on when I cut the caramel by hand. As I said, you can cut it in the cutter. When you're doing that, I suggest that you cut strips like this, and then you put them into the cutter and cut the strips, because they are gonna slightly stick to the cutter, but also if they sit too long on the cutter, they can start to kind of like stick together again. So just doing one line of caramels is gonna help you to cut them and then just take them off. So I'm gonna pick one up for you here to show you kind of like the texture and the feel of it. So it's a little bit bendy, it's very glossy. You can see I've made a quite like thin caramel. It's not that thick. You can obviously have it a little thicker and higher. But if you are going to cut it in the cutter, I'm gonna show you how you can do that. So slightly oil your cutter and put just one strip at a time in your cutter, and then you just go through and cut it. But you are going to have to kind of like peel them off the cutter a little bit, because they're not like stuck, but they're sticking a little bit, so you have to kind of like take them off like this. And as you can see, it doesn't create as tight cuts as you would do if you would cut it by hand. So if you are going to enrobe them and cut them in the cutter, do have a bottom shablon that is gonna make them not stick to the cutter, and it's gonna be a nice operation. And remember that having them slightly cool is gonna help to create a better cut. So if you are now going to cut them completely by hand, you flip the slab of caramel over. You use the small ruler, as you can see. I mark them at 3 centimeters, whatever size fits your operations is what you go for. But you have to create the lines the other way as well, so you have guidelines in both directions when you are gonna cut your caramels by hand. So you place your caramel rods the other direction, and then you just mark your lines there where you want to cut them. So I want to repeat, I keep my slab slightly cold, so I take it out from the fridge at around 13 degrees Celsius and then cut it. It's gonna help with your cutting, and the cuts are gonna be way tighter and nicer. You can cut it at room temperature, no problems at all, but the edges are not gonna be as tight and square, and it's gonna be a little bit stickier to handle. So here I'm first cutting up 3 centimeters times 9 centimeter, and the caramel is about 1 centimeter high. So this is kind of like a bar shape. You can wrap it like that, or if you are going to enrobe it, remember that you have to have a bottom shablon on there. But this is a really nice bite size, I think. And the other ones are gonna be 3 by 3 centimeters and 1 centimeter high. The size and height is all up to you. It doesn't really matter. Do what suits you the best. This caramel is going to hit a home run. I assure you that. The flavor profile, the texture is just so nice, and it's also easy to handle with your knife. As you can see, I don't have to warm my knife, I'm just cutting, and yeah, it creates a really nice clean result. So my tip here, if you are gonna cut them into bonbon size, so this is 3 by 3 centimeter, is that you cut out strips. But as you remember, we have the markings from before, so you cut out strips and then you just cut your bonbons like this, or caramels like this. And as you can see, this is a quite fast and nice method and operation, so it doesn't take too long. So marking your caramels both directions, cut long strips, and then use a cutting board. As you can see here, a plastic cutting board or a wooden cutting board. It's going to help to prevent the caramel from sticking. And this is a caramel without the bottom shablon, still not sticking, and it's very nice to handle. But if you also do have the bottom shablon on there, it's going to help even more. But yeah, long strips with the markings on, and then just cutting with a knife is going to be a very smooth operation. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and I hope it's gonna help you to create nice caramels that don't get crystallized. You have a nice texture, nice flavor. Let me know what you think. I would not like to say good luck, because it's not luck. If you follow all the steps and do all the methods as I teach, you will have great results. So go for it and let me know what you think.